Steven, how are you doing?
Good, Joel. It's good to see you today on this
You too.
blustery, wintry day here in New England.
Yeah, I saw you guys got snow out there. It hasn't snowed yet, but it's getting colder. You can definitely tell.
For certain.
Have you ever watched the movie The Big Short?
Oh, yes, I have. It's a
Who's
fantastic.
your favorite character?
It's funny. I think undeniably Christian Bale is amazing in it, but I also I really like Steve Carell's character as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Jeremy Strong's
He was
character is
fun. Yeah,
good. Yeah, they're all like amazing. I mean, they're all super serious and they're
yeah.
intense. But there's a fair amount of comedy. I think. Ryan Gosling brings a lot of comedy to the movie, but
Right.
it just to me it's a interesting kind of film because it's we'll call it historical fiction. I mean it's based on a real event, but there's
Mm-hmm.
probably some fictionalized aspects of it.
Yeah.
But it is the way that it's shot. It's also it breaks the fourth wall and the communication with the viewer at times. And there's some very interesting ways of the techniques in the movie as well to get that point across. Because think about it, it's about the subprime mortgage crisis. That's kind of a boring topic for most people who don't understand how finance works, right? So they made it super interesting.
Yeah. When I read the article that we're about to talk about, or that brought me to the topic we're going to talk today, I went and rewatched the movie to sort of get the image of what they portrayed Michael Burry. But before we talk about why Michael Burry is suddenly back in headlines, we need to understand who he really is beyond the movie version, because it's a lot different than what I imagined. So Burry originally trained as a medical doctor. He left residency to launch Scion Capital in 2000, and he built his reputation by doing something most investors don't. He read primary data and mortgage fillings by the thousands and financial footnotes line by line. He developed a track record of identifying systemic risks. Early by 2005, he had concluded that the U.S. housing market was structurally unsound and built entirely on subprime loans that were already showing signs of failure. His decision to short the mortgage market through credit default swaps became the foundation of the 2008 story. It made Scion one of the most profitable funds of that period and cemented Burry as one of the few people who predicted the collapse with data, not opinion. That's a real reason why people like me, when they see his name attached to the modern trend, pay attention. There was one scene in the movie where this guy, played by Brad Pitt, with the two young guys who just started a fund, I believe, when they closed that
Mm.
deal of betting against the housing market, they were like, "Oh my gosh, we're filthy rich. We're
Yeah.
just gonna be balling out of our minds from now on." And he was like, "Could you stop celebrating? Like, if we're right, we're going to have millions of people lose their retirement, lose their houses. Like, this is real life stuff."
Yeah.
So when I looked into the actual person of Michael Burry, I was like, yeah, I almost feel like you can see it in the way he acts and looks, how little fun he's having doing this, because we're about to talk about what he actually did that turned some heads in the recent weeks. But I feel like he knows the weight of whatever's going on, and if he's right, it's gonna be bad, and there's not gonna be any reason to celebrate. Although he puts everything on red, then is gonna be very rich if he is indeed right, like he was with the housing market. So it's kind of, but
700 million in
what
profits. Yeah. A huge
yeah,
amount of
so
return. Yeah. Yeah.
so let's briefly look into what he did in 2008, and then look at what he did just recently. So in 2004, Burry began analyzing performance data on mortgage loans, subprime mortgage loans, which is basically like, are people paying on time? Are they paying on their mortgages? Are they late? Are they whatever? So he started noticing high default rates long before broader financial industry acknowledged the problem. And he found that adjustable rate mortgages were resetting in ways borrowers couldn't sustain, and he documented a systematic pattern of declining loan quality. In 2005, he approached banks to create credit default swaps tied to specific mortgage bonds, instruments that barely existed at the time. So, which is portrayed in the movie as well, where he goes in and they're like, well, if you're just going to give us money, we're not going to say no to it, but we want to warn you on doing this. So for nearly 2 years, he faced pressure from his own investors because his positions were early and losing money on paper, but the underlying data never changed. When the mortgage market collapsed, Scion recorded extraordinary gains, and Burry's analysis was validated. Fast forward to today. In late 23 and 24, Burry's regulatory fillings showed that Scion Asset Management had taken positions involving some of the largest AI-related companies in the marketing put options tied to major technology stocks that benefited from the AI boom. These filings suggested he was concerned about how quickly valuations were rising across the sector. Then in 2025, he deregistered Scion from its investment advisory status with the SEC. This doesn't mean the fund is closed, but it does mean the firm is no longer required to disclose its holdings publicly through quarterly filings. Without those disclosures, analysts can no longer track what Burry is buying or selling. Historically, Burry has made similar moves when repositioning his strategy and reducing transparency around his trades. Now, you see, or I definitely experienced how in a matter of a few weeks, the narrative in media and in the public went from it's an AI boom to now it's a AI bubble. And I almost feel like it's sort of backtracking again, going back to, it's not a bubble anymore, it's a boom. When you hear people say, oh my gosh, it's an AI bubble, what is your first reaction, your first thoughts, or what would be your answer?
So what we are seeing in the market over the last 20 to 30 years is a rapid shift from being information curious to information fully dependent. So I do not think that AI is headed in the direction of a bubble. I think AI needs to have the market itself needs some conditioning, and there may be some overvaluation here or there. There definitely are going to be startups, and all manners of the landscape are going to be, from the consumer side of AI to the business centric side, scientific side. There's going to be some rationalization of an overvalued position there, I'm sure. However, we have become utterly information dependent. AI is the method in which we make data actionable. And it is the most advanced method we have today. I mean, all of the major manufacturers are beating down, every bit of resource they have to be able to, invest in AI, but they're not only like literally working up their organizations and all their bench strength to be able to accommodate that, but they're also working on quantum computing, which is that next generation of processing, which is going to open up even more opportunities. So I think AI and the investments in what we're seeing in all the infrastructure spending, from the semiconductor itself to the facilities to the information layer, I think we're seeing a massive amount of investment there. We're also seeing adoption. And we're seeing adoption in the cloud. We're seeing adoption on premise with enterprise companies. We're seeing it at the edge with, consumer brands. It's everywhere, right? You mentioned before naming your chat GPT, right? Your prompt. It's in our pockets, right? So at some point we have to admit that this is sort of here to stay. I do think that sometimes we in the technology industry get wrapped around the technology being the answer, the technology being the end, the end goal. It's not. It's what you do with the technology. So as we see more use cases evolve, we see more opportunity created from AI, you're going to shift away from AI as being the center of it to being a utility to drive outcome. And right now we're in that, that early period where we're kind of, it's a very, sort of early beginnings of how to bring AI to the market. But I don't see a bubble. I see actually a rise and then sort of a flat and sort of a steady state at that point where it becomes the fabric of how we do things.
Where do you see the way out for? I mean, one thing, I think there's more layers than just to this whole discussion. Like, one thing that struck me badly was that in these last few days around the Black Friday deals that companies run, that this time of year, some even turn it into Black Friday weeks.
Yeah.
And I read a statistic where 95% of purchases were loaned, were financed, were not made out of pocket, but made for some buy now, pay later sort of scheme. And now we have a company like NVIDIA with a 5 trillion market cap. And if this company so much as does as just cough, the market, the stock market will have, I mean, every time something happens, the outlashes from it are just absurd. Like, people lose millions on their not millions, but thousands on their retirement funds because somebody has a bad day and says NVIDIA is a bubble. And I think I read, I never verified it, but I think I read somewhere that now ChatGPT is looking into running ads in their chatbot. Like you're going to run a query and
We
say,
already talked
what's
about
the
sexy chat.
best?
We talked about sexy chat a couple weeks
So
ago.
on top of that, like you're going to look or, okay, which is the best restaurant? Well, and then ChatGPT
Yeah,
is going to be like, well, the best restaurant is, but we're getting paid by this restaurant. So you might
right.
try one. You might want to try this. So
AI is
my
not,
question is,
AI is today the large language models that you're interacting with Gen AI are democratized. Today they are democratized. They're trained on information that exists. They're tuned and fine-tuned based on existing information. So it's sort of garbage in, garbage out in a lot of ways.
mm,
Websites that contain information, the LLMs are trained on that information. That information is turned into response. We know that the responses are sometimes questionable. There's hallucinations, there's drift. So we don't necessarily, what you put in is what you get out. You look at the news. You look at one news channel from another. It's like the same story told two different ways. And you see the same thing with the LLMs. You go to Anthropic or you go to, Copilot, you'll see different results because their algorithms are going to treat that information differently as that how they've been trained and what the kind of response you may see. Look, I think it's interesting right now. Are we in a bubble? No, I don't think we're in a bubble. And by the way, the rubber hits the road, and I know you mentioned NVIDIA, but also Palantir. The rubber hits the road on revenue growth and bookings. Okay.
mm,
Right now, we are seeing supply shortages in memory, okay, which is one of the components that's used in this processing of information. Semiconductor companies are going to be stretched to be able to keep up with the demand. That's actually an amazing opportunity because what happens is that new companies will come in and say, I can do that more efficiently. I can close
mhm,
those gaps in the supply chain and I can deliver a
mhm,
superior product at a lower cost. This is Darwinian in nature. You understand?
mhm,
So what's happening in the market is you have a very prominent leader in NVIDIA, but you have all of these competitors in their orbit, insurgents who are looking to break into that market. That is very good. That is a very good thing. You have all these new companies who are trying to do this much differently than NVIDIA. Wait and see, because that creates tremendous amount of wealth and opportunity for investors, for the people who are building it, for the economy. You watch. This is
mm.
exactly what we saw so many times in the last 40 years. Did you ever think there would be an electric car, an autonomous electric car that would dominate, in the case of California? I don't know how many Teslas there are, but Teslas and Toyotas, right? But
Mhm.
that look back 40, 50, 60 years at the automotive market. And if you asked somebody
Yeah.
50 years ago about automotive, they would have said the same thing about AI. They're like, oh, it's a bubble. This electric car thing is going to work. It's never going to work. And now we've got
Yeah.
a viable competitor to, a traditional combustion engine. It's amazing.
Right.
We are truly blessed to be in a period of time where we've seen rapid evolution across multiple sectors. You and I, even young Joel, has seen in the last 20 some odd years rapid evolution of this particular area, information. Right? It's amazing.
Right. I think I don't so my thing is this. I'm very positive AI is here to stay. I don't think it's gonna eventually fail and not come back. This technology is here to stay unquestionably. I also think that we're a lot further away from AGI than we think we are,
Hmm.
to the level of what we believe AI can be able to do at a certain point in time if it keeps developing and if research does its job and develops it further and further. But then you see companies like OpenAI are, I think they have a rate of 3% of people that are actually buying the Chat GPT premium. Most of them are using it for free. They're in desperate need of money. They're burning through money like crazy. They're in an almost circular economy with AMD, with NVIDIA, with Microsoft even. One is buying from the other and then investing into the third and stuff like that. And just as the internet is the most democratic place in the world, I think artificial intelligence should be and is currently and should be down the road, where the amount of people that are for one thing are going to be the determining factor that is shaping how AI is used and how it's built. But right now, I have the feeling that everyone attaches artificial intelligence, the whole industry around it, to these 5 or 6 companies. And we watch the downfall and uprise just by the standards of those companies, which I think is a bad sign for our economy, because our economy is struggling all over the world. Germany is doing not too well. Consumerism in the US is down, which if Americans don't buy stuff no more, then we're fucked. Like
Yeah.
that's
You
and
want to
anything that
you want
happens
to
in the
screw
US
China
happens
over? You want to screw China over? It's easy. You don't have to put tariffs. Just make it impossible for people to afford things. They won't. I mean, literally,
right,
like if they're not making enough, they won't spend naturally, and people will
right.
try to spend, and their credit cards will increase in
They're loaning
debt. But
stuff like
yeah,
when Uber Eats and like DoorDash, those companies thought about the idea of being able to give out interest-free loans for your McDonald's order, where you can go get your $25 for McDonald's in 6 months, 6-month installed
yeah.
payments. I was like, brother, are we not seeing the problem here? Is that really where we're at? Like, is that the vision we have for the next 20 years of economy? So I'm with you that, but I'm a little scared for how I've known people to react around certain economy happenings, I guess I could say, and how it's going to eventually maybe turn out for some of those big AI companies. Because, I mean, NVIDIA right now, their market cap is twice the size of Canada. That's absurd. Like, no company in the world should have that much value given to them without actually proving it to a point where he's like, it's huge, but it's okay, I
So
guess.
if you're an investor and you're looking at that, if you're looking at the technology sector and you're looking at them as being the bellwether, then you're saying to yourself, there are insurgents and disruptors and challengers that are in that orbit where they can invest in those technologies. NVIDIA doesn't have a lock on the perspective of building a GPU. They have great technology. They have great engineers. They have great patents, but these are not, completely novel techniques that can be, not, they can be replicated. Intel, Qualcomm,
Right.
ARM. These are all AMD. These are all would be larger competitors in this sort of milieu of NVIDIA. Some are partners actually as well. But think of that next band of opportunities just outside of that sort of larger group. There are so many companies that could be innovating, and the investors could be looking at that, and they are, trust me. They are looking at techniques, they are looking at alternatives, they are looking at investments, and they're saying, NVIDIA is proving the point that there's a super demand for this stuff. So now let's look at that next band out a few rings away from NVIDIA and then figure out how to invest and accelerate those innovations. I guarantee you we're going to see disruption in the next 24 months that is going to rival what we know is NVIDIA. The moment you think you own the solution, you own the answer, is the moment your competitor behind you has already made a plan to take your lunch. The moment you think
Right.
you have it all, they are already planning to take your lunch. They're going to steal your cheese. And if they have
Mm-hmm.
2 years to figure out how to steal your cheese, in the next 24 months, you better be watching your back because they are already planning to launch something disruptive. You watch. In the next 2 years, we're going to see, I'm going to predict it, a rival from outside that is going to take NVIDIA's lunch.
Well, man, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. I think we're going to have a bad time if one of these companies actually goes belly up, which could happen without the whole market busting, of course. But my feeling, and I'm neither an expert nor informed to a degree where I can make a statement that's factually based, but I think one of them at least is full of crap with what they're saying they're doing and the valuation and the amount of money OpenAI is burning through, while other companies are largely scaling back their investments into AI and are sort of like, we'll watch you do whatever you need to do, and then we'll see where we are at in 2 years and where you're at in 2 years. But
Well, back to Burry for a second. It's interesting how he was very prescient in his thinking about the mortgage crisis. I would say data was a tremendously important factor, and then this sort of investigational, kind of the investigation that it's represented in the film as a kind of a multi-point investigation by the team of people who were looking at the problem, and they were looking at it from different perspectives. If I go back to 2006 or 7, before the bubble burst, before we saw, the recession and all
mm-hmm,
that associated with this. It's interesting. I remember I bought a house, my house that I live in here in New Hampshire. I bought a house in 2006. And I remember how easy it was and I was making a
Mm-hmm.
good income. I had savings, we had equity in our other home that we were selling, but I remember how easy it was to get a mortgage. And in my father's time, I never remember any, my mother and father's time, I don't remember that ever happening. But in this case,
Mm-hmm.
I remember just how easy it was to get a mortgage. Now, that to me was a signal that if I can get a mortgage like that, other people can get a mortgage like that. That's exactly what was happening. No docs,
Right. Mm-hmm.
30-day turnarounds or less.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I remember when we were looking for the new home, I gave my salary and, my compensation as a metric, no doc. And they said, oh, you can afford this house is 7 times your salary. So if we're living in that kind of environment where you don't check my background, you don't look at my financials, you don't look at my history, my spending, you don't look at my debt to income ratios under a microscope, and you give me a window of opportunity back to credit that's 7 or 8 times my actual income, I could
Mm-hmm.
buy, a seriously huge, beautiful mansion and not be able to
Mm-hmm.
afford it. At what point did we think this was going to last? So I think Burry is definitely a bright person. I think he is an amazingly smart person. You can't be a physician without having a great mind, right?
Yeah.
He's got a great retention and reasoning. But I think at the same time, go back to 2000 bubble, he was going to, he called the short on 2000, but there was a lot of overvaluation. But then look at 2020. He tried to call Tesla out, and Tesla proved him wrong. They
Mm.
ramped production, they got through
Right.
COVID, and now we're in a different position with electric vehicles. So I'm just saying, look at Burry as an example. He can call him right sometimes. He's not going to call him right all the time. But I'll give him
Yeah.
the credit for the mortgage crisis. But there was a lot of other data around that was pointing to a problem.
Yeah, right. And he was early. He was very like 3 years early
He
back
was
then.
early because he saw
2005,
the
he did it.
signs. I think if you watch the movie or if you read, I think if you read more about the background of the actual story, the vehicle in which the CDO, which that was created by the mortgage companies, that particular financial vehicle was essentially a risk mitigation vehicle, which was to be able to take really badly rated mortgages and mix them with really good mortgages. And so that was a
Right.
risk mitigation strategy. And in theory, like an economist would look at that and go, well, that's a good idea. You can balance the debt, you can balance the risk. And so there's a potential that will sort of continue to move along and everything will be fine. But there was way too much junk in the package. And that's, what the movie exposes, at least.
Right. Well, man, I hope you're right. I really hope you're right, because I think if this actually is a bubble and bursts, then I think we're in a deep world of trouble. We'll see. We'll stay attached to the story. I think it's going to take another few months to actually uncover more information that might be needed. But for now, thank you, Stephen. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you soon.
You too, Joel. Super conversation today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye bye.